mentioned, the topic for this research follows the specific communication experiences of students of color in predominantly white institutions. So it leads to the research question, what are the communication experiences of students of color in predominantly white institutions? The general objective throughout this research is to center the voices of people of color through using qualitative methods. Throughout my study, the specific experiences of students of color at PWIs were closely investigated. Focusing on lived experiences and making sense of data while also making it easily accessible to multiple audiences, the preliminary findings explain and translate the data and highlight the lived experiences of people of color that occur within institutions every day. The research paradigm selected for this study is interpretive research and critical research. Additionally, it should also be noted that the utilization of interpretive research within the study also incorporates aspects of critical research, specifically because there's a sense of uncovering the power dynamic within this context, since the very topic question suggests a method of power dynamic at play, which could be perceived as questioning whether there's racial discrimination taking place against students of color. Critical research pushes to uncover power structures by identifying the individuals with or without power, with higher or lower power, which solidifies the necessity of both paradigms for this study. After receiving IRB in August, the recruitment process for this research began. As of today, 58 participants have been interviewed, ranging from first year to last year students at PWIs located throughout Maryland, Virginia, Pittsburgh, New York, Atlanta, Ontario, Canada, and even more. It should be noted that this research is still an ongoing process, and the findings presented today are considered the preliminary findings of this research. It should also be noted that, the biographic data from participants included in this study reflected the identities of students of color, largely from Black student population found within these PWIs. Semi-structured interviews were utilized to find the information necessary for this research. A few of the questions included in these interviews were, how would you describe the communication experiences with your peers as a person of color at a PWI? Or how would you describe your communicative experiences with your instructors who are not persons of color at a PWI? After collection, some of the excerpts from the interview were deeply investigated to uncover the apparent patterns within the collected information by perceiving the specific codes within the data, then proceeding to navigate the specific themes in which the different codes fall into within the different storylines of the included research participants' experience. The main themes to emerge were those regarding identity, intercultural barriers, and isolation. When approaching the concept of identity, a few of the codes that emerged were culture shock taking place to people of color that had not been exposed to a PWI context, as well as an overwhelming sense of self-consciousness at play within people of color, ignited from a fear of saying the wrong thing in this new environment. Within the theme of intercultural barriers, we find people of color exhibiting different communication behaviors depending on the person being spoken to, which is otherwise referred to as code switching, as well as a lack of relation and connection between students of color and faculty caused by two different opposing experiences in background. When examining the theme of isolation, we find the implicit silencing of people of color due to a lack of validating or encouraging students of color to contribute in a classroom setting. On the contrary, the phenomenon of the pressure of not being able to afford to mess up or having to constantly prove their self-worth by being the one representative of their race due to the overwhelming imbalance of diversity within the classroom setting. So within the theme of minority identity, one of the participants' response regarding culture shock is as follows, quote, I've always attended a predominantly Black institution my entire life. A lot of my peers were African, so entering a PWI was a very out of place experience for me. And I didn't really know how to communicate or how to kind of be myself, just because I've never been around so many people that were not the same race as me. So it felt very out of place for me. I just didn't know who I should be talking to or how to kind of regularly just make friends with them, just because I've never really spoken to them like that before. And touching on the code of self-consciousness, one of the participants says, quote, I don't know if I'm gonna say the wrong thing or if I'm gonna make a joke, but they don't see it as a joke. I just don't wanna upset people. Within the theme of intercultural barriers, an example of code switching at play becomes apparent when a participant explains, quote, I 100% find myself code switching. It's a little new for me because I went to a high school that was predominantly black. My county is a black county. But then going into college, it felt like, I don't know, I had to turn on a persona that fit the community that I was in, which was white. And so I had to tone certain things down, and the interests weren't as common. Then, a participant who grew up in a specific culture in which the family held high academic expectations from them highlights the code of differences in experiences causing a lack of understanding from PWI faculty of their particular experience when they respond, quote, "I'm sure the advisors or counselors had good intentions, but when it's something that they can't really relate to or have any experience in, it's very hard to communicate with them." Making sure that just displaying my needs and understanding that this is what I want and this is what I don't want, and that even if I fail a class or even if I do this, they can say it's the end of the world, but for me, it is the end of the world because we have two different experiences. Seeing as how the participant expresses that failing a class as their counselor suggested wouldn't be a big issue, it just simply isn't an option for this participant in particular. It could be argued that the student is essentially not receiving the support they simply need from this advisor because of the difference in their experiences. And notions of isolation of students of color are present in a participant's response illustrating the silencing of people of color. As they explain, quote, "I felt very strongly about something and I gave a long explanation to something that we were talking about. And I feel like it was completely brushed off. The professor definitely said something along the lines of, yeah, no, that makes sense, and kind of moved on. And I remember my peer kind of alluded to it. He didn't really say exactly what I said, but he alluded to the idea, and the professor found it so fascinating. But also, I just fully explained the whole concept of what this white male peer was alluding to. And I feel like he was given a sort of praise, and I found it very unprofessional. But it was a white male. I was the only black woman in that class, so it was already very intimidating to speak. However, in the exact opposite to silencing people of color, the notion of the pressure to be the one person of color to speak becomes apparent when a participant responses as follows. Very broadly, we were talking about slavery, and this white woman felt the need to give her opinion about something. She was almost romanticizing slavery. It was just so hard to hear that. We feel like it's our responsibility to let her know, you can't think like that, you can't say something like that. So one of my peers checked her and said, I think it's important that we don't romanticize slavery. It's almost like we have the job of correcting people. Always this job of being around people that have grown up thinking it's okay to think in certain ways or to say ignorant things. It's just a struggle to hear some people speak so ignorantly about your race as you're sitting right there when it's coming out of white peers, and you just have to, again, be the one spokesperson for your entire race. So, people of color are the direct stakeholders against any form of discrimination pertaining race and can be influenced or face advantages or disadvantages due to the individual's racial identity. This proves to be a concern for people of color as the sake of their success or failure simply falls between the lines of their particular treatment and their communication experiences within institutional context. These findings could help higher education administrators and those who have not been exposed to working with minority students. It is important to note that the goal is equity instead of equality, because not all students are starting from the same point. Those who are at a disadvantage could benefit from the help of those who don't have the experiences of these struggle by simply wanting to understand these issues to be able to help. Eliminating negative communication experiences towards people of color is imperative to institutional structures in order to create solid relationships with its students, which only results in successful future members of society, thereby reflecting the efficiency of the university. And that concludes my final report.
I'm just gonna give it a spot on, very nice. So questions, comments?
Yes.
I just want to congratulate you on this project. I think the research is super necessary, very relevant, very applicable to the setting that we're in as university students. I think that having the personal anecdotes of your interview subjects makes it very relevant as well. And I wanted to ask which of the codes you found to be most personally relatable.
I didn't even get through all of them, and I came to about 54, it's hard not to resonate with almost everything. Being a person of color in PWI, almost not about to be a PWI anymore, but I would say the silencing stuck out to me. It didn't resonate with me. I don't relate to it, like I don't personally. But that was a very, very interesting concept to understand that, like, to contribute, I thrive off of like contributing in classrooms, and to contribute and for it to not be validated was beyond me. That was one that stuck out to me for sure.
And as a follow-up question, I guess I'm sort of within the subject, but what inspired you to research this topic?
It's a question I get asked all the time. I mean, I've stuck with this topic for I truly do believe in cultivating a diverse and accepting society. I think this is where it starts, communication, hence why I'm a communication studies major. I just really believe that there is, at least I hope, there's a possibility for a reality where we can all have the cultural competency to communicate with everybody respectfully.
I agree. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes.
You mentioned at the end, one of your recommendations was, hopefully that universities would work on better understanding. Obviously, sponsoring your research is a step in that direction. So kudos on that one. But what are other strategies that you would recommend that universities, PWI, historically PWI institutions might employ in order to fix this problem?
I truly do believe some universities are better at this than others, but it starts with listening to, the target audience, the students of color, hearing what they need, because nobody else knows that experience but them, you know what I mean? So you can't assume some kind of method will work best and just implement it on their own. It can't be exclusive towards the administrative boards of different PWIs. The students of color have to be integrated in that process, is what I believe. So I think, just reaching out and I feel like Towson does a good job of it, but just having a very proactive faculty that tries to include everybody and just paying attention to all of the students' needs.
And I'll also just quickly add that, especially for those of us who are in the classroom, it starts with what examples do we give in the classroom, what does our reading list look like, what videos do we show in the classrooms. Those are little things that we can encourage that bring about inclusivity, specifically for students of color.
Which I can attest to, Professor Adebayo does a stellar job with that.
All right.
Well, can I just, it's interesting you should mention that. I just had a conversation with a student of ours in economics, and he's doing some research with some K through 12 economic education, how students did in different counties and different schools and things like that. And he's using this data that he got, and I said, show me the question, because I was seeing the counties and the county level differences in the answers to these. Some of these are economic, some are personal finance questions. And so he showed me the question, and I said, John, read that question. Just read it out loud, right? So he reads the question, and I said, what are the counties that didn't do well in that? And so he tells me the counties, and I said, what does the population look like in those counties? And he said, predominantly African American. I said, where are those names from? And he's like, they're like European white examples. And I said, so if you're a kid reading that question, how connected do you feel to that question? I said, you gotta think about that. I said, so recommendations going back to these folks, is that their question choice is horrific. I mean, it's just the examples they give are almost exclusively just blatantly white. I mean, it's just
one story.
It's this. Yes, that's exactly it. And so if I'm right, if I don't fit that story, I am checking out of that test. I said, so and he's like, holy cow, I didn't even read it that way. He's like, and I said,